So I'm going to walk around a little bit. Let me first give a little bit on my background. So I'm going to talk today around open workspace and human collaboration. This comes from research that I did as a student researcher at Harvard University. I now live and work in Vietnam, working to set up a new university in Vietnam. So happy to talk about that after this. But for today, I'm going to focus on that research that we did at Harvard Business School. And I hope that you guys are going to take two things from today's talk. The first is the impact of the open office. We're going to talk a little bit about that, some of the research findings that we had. The second is to push you to think about new ways to use technology to measure how people collaborate and communicate in the office. And that's kind of my domain. I'm not a designer, but I am someone who researches and interested in collaboration. And I want to first start off by talking about my first experience in an office. I was a junior, which is the third year in university. I had my first internship. It was a big opportunity for me. And I was pretty type A. I knew I wanted to get a job. And I showed up to an office that looked just like this. You could say, talking about open office, and you could see other people working. I was working as a data scientist. And my first day, there was another internship friend of mine whose name was Carter. And Carter and I were talking about our experience in the office. And first few days I go around and I start to get really annoyed because I come into the office and I sit down and I start to work and I'm working and then someone comes over and they say hi and that's really nice of them, but I'm a little distracted, so I'm like, okay, that's fine. I talk to them for a little bit, then I go back and I try to kind of turn into the wall to try to avoid them. A new person comes up, says hi, I say hello, I talk to them. I'm getting more annoyed, I put on headphones, I'm trying to dive deep into my work. A third person comes in, I say, I'm sick of this, I can't take this anymore. What is this office? And I talked to my friend Carter about this, and Carter loves it. He loves the dynamism, he loves to see other people, he loves to interact, and we have this big conflict. So I start to look around the office, where can I go to find a better place for me to work? I do not want to work in this beautiful hellhole of a WeWork. I need to find a nicer place. And so I find the basement of our office. And I promise you, it looks exactly like this. There was one point in which I saw a rat walk by my laptop, but it was completely and utterly private. I was so happy to find this place. So I loved this place to work. Well, I love it, but I found it preferable. But my friend Carter preferred this place. And this kind of started me on this research journey around why do different people react differently to different types of offices, and in general, how do we react to our environment when we work? To Seville's point, here's a little American in me, the American version of The Office. We spent 80,000 hours on average working. That's around 25% of our entire life, including sleep. So clearly, how we work and where we work matters. In my case, I was literally working here, which was, I'd say a big impact on my well-being. And around this time, as I was in college and before, there are two trends that kind of come out of this tech boom that's existing around the world, but particularly in the United States, especially where I was in San Francisco. And I think that tech boom is leading to two big things which I'm going to talk about today. The first is a revolution in communication technology. So that means that people are communicating in completely different ways than they did 30 years ago. Email, of course, but then Slack, social media, a wide variety of different communication platforms. And then another thing that's happening is the growth in the open office. And this is coming in part from a few trends. Of course, open offices are cheaper. That's a big part of it. You can put more people into a square foot. But as well, an open office is considered to be a more open space, one that kind of fits in with this tech culture of collaboration, no hierarchy. And so when I was doing research at Harvard Business School, we wanted to understand what is the impact of going from a closed office, one defined by physical boundaries, to an open office, one defined by open boundaries in which you can see other people. And so in order to do this, we recruited two companies that were going through this transition. They were transitioning from an open or from a closed to an open office. We want to understand, how does communication change inside this office? And so we measured it using two main types of data. The first type of data is using sensors. So we gave each person physical badges. These are called sociometric badges. They include infrared, accelerometer, Bluetooth, that track what is happening, who you're talking to, and how long you're talking. It does not include any of the content of the conversation for privacy reasons, and also because it's a lot of data, it's a lot of space to record for 10 hours. But it does record who and when they're talking and where. And the other form of data is electronic form of data. So that's what you might imagine email, IM, Slack data. So we recorded it before the change from a closed to open office and after the change. And I kind of want to put this to you guys. Did the amount of communication go up or down? Let's do like a show of hands. Who thinks that communication went up after transitioning to an open office? I thought it was going to go. Okay, who thought it went down? Great. Can I have a representative from the up camp kind of to describe their reasoning? Why would it go up? I saw some, so who's, yeah, please. No, please, physical contact. Physical contact. So, actually, can you say more? Easier because you're close, you can see them? Absolutely. I think right. So physical contact, so you can see them. Yeah, exactly. Like you can look at where people are, you hear them, and so you want to talk to them because you know they're there. Absolutely, I think that's reasonable. For someone who thinks communication is going to go down, anyone have, please?
Everybody is longing for the basement.
Everyone wants the basement. Absolutely. We all want the rat cave. That's right. And so what? But why? Even if I'm longing for it, why would communication go down?
As you described, you want to get rid of communication.
Yep.
Concentrate, so you have a different. No, I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
So, if you have the open office and you don't like it, you have to create your own mental walls and mental
Right.
barriers, so communication might go down.
Absolutely. So maybe you avoid it. Maybe you even physically leave.
Yes.
In my case,
Yep.
to the basement. Or maybe you find a clean bathroom nearby to do your work. Who knows? Many options. But okay, interesting. It goes up, it goes down. So let me share the results. Now, to give the context, these companies moved to an open office in part for cost savings, but also because they want to create a more collaborative environment. So collaboration was one of the goals of these companies. So what happened? So we found two main effects of going from a closed to an open office. The first effect is that face-to-face communication went down by about 70% in both of these case studies. But electronic communication went up by between 20 to 50%. So what we found is that people tended to move their type of communication from physical face-to-face communication to online communication. And why would that happen? I mean, our research, to be clear, actually doesn't answer the question of why it happens. It only answers this kind of descriptive question of what it does happen. But we can guess. And one of our guesses is that people are polite. You're in an open office. What was your name again? Christian, what was your name? Okay, confused. Confusing. Let's say you're an office of only Christians, okay? It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So let's say I don't want to disturb Christian, but I have to talk to Christian, okay? Bear with me. Instead of going over and speaking to Christian, having this kind of physical communication and contact, I might send her a message. So that's one of our hypotheses, but there also might be other hypotheses. Again, maybe people are physically doing what I did and just leaving. Please. Yes.
Used a sensor.
Yes, sociometric badges.
It was visible because this changed also the fact how I communicate. If I know that I will be tracked,
Absolutely.
so I change my my way of
Totally.
communicating.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. It's a great point. So there, please.
Because I raised my hand because I was sure that the communication could increase.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the quality of the communication? That's another issue. So I didn't want to be seen as, oh, for sure it will increase, but what kind of?
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me kind of put both of those questions. So first of all, it's a great question around, I mean, of course, you're wearing this badge. It's kind of weird. I mean, it's just like kind of hanging out there. Two things that we did to make sure that we don't think that was the effect. Of course, we can't completely know. One is that there's a period beforehand where you get used to the badges. So it's not as if the only days we're recording are when you're holding the badges. And as you might guess, people over time just get used to their environment. And so you first have a brief period, 5 to 10 days where you use the badges, but we're not actually recording any information. The second is that we use the badges in both the before and the after case. And so if there's any effect, even if it's, let's say, decreased communication, it would affect both of the phases equally, we believe, unless there's some interaction between wearing a badge and open office. So that would be the only way that could affect. But it's a great question, and I think it's very important. To the question around the type of communication, I think that's actually exactly our finding. We found that communication, it's hard to say if communication went up or went down, it just changed. And there's a big research literature in what's called media quality. Media quality is how good is the communication? And one way to describe that is face-to-face communication is probably the best form. Next is video, phone, and email and IM is actually quite bad. It's very hard to get across complex information because if I'm mad at one of the Christians, they don't necessarily know because they can't see my face via text. So it's a great point around media quality. Let me just say a few key takeaways for myself, and not as a designer, so I found these kind of funny. This is just, there's a lot of media reaction to this article, which was gratifying, but also I kind of thought was funny. My first takeaway is that people really hate the open office. This is maybe my favorite article title of all time. The reason you hate the open office is because it sucks. It's like a little tautological, like if it sucks, of course you'd hate it, but there's a lot of negative energy, and we can talk about why that might be. I think a big part of it is kind of my reaction, which was around privacy. The second takeaway is that I learned that popular media can really exaggerate results. I mean, I actually told you guys what the finding was. We had 2 case studies, and we found the communication went down face-to-face and went up electronically. And in one interview, in a series of interviews with our first study, we qualitatively learned that they thought productivity went down. We didn't have any measures for that. However, as you're learning, it's official. Open plan offices are now the dumbest management fad of all time. So it's funny, I've actually found that interesting because I always thought that paperweights were the dumbest management fad of all time. But apparently open offices are. So there's a lot of interesting takeaways from media. Now, here's the third one to get to your question. How will we measure Baukultur? And my push for you guys is to think about how we can begin to quantify communication. And the 3 technologies that I want to describe, or that we've described today, is first, of course, is sensors. We talked about in this study we use sensors. They're, I think, a great push back on sensors. They're kind of obtrusive if you can see them, but they're a way of measuring communication between people. Second one, and this one I find very interesting as a data scientist, is using video data, using new forms of machine learning, such as neural networks, to track. This is using, as you see in this GIF, a machine learning algorithm to track individuals, assign numbers to the individuals, and see where they are. And you could do the same thing for communication. Of course, huge questions on privacy, but I think an important way that we could get an answer to, is this working? Is our spaces working? And then my pet project, which I'm very interested in and want to do research on, is using virtual reality to understand how the office works. There's a number of companies already using virtual reality to mimic offices where you work inside a virtual reality headset. That's a great place to experiment, where you could change small pieces of the environment in an experimental way to half the population and not the other, and then you could see what are the impact. So instead of developing a whole new structure, you can change like that a piece of the office, and you can understand how do humans react to that. So I'm really excited to talk with you guys, and I appreciate you taking the time. And I hope that you guys help and think about how we can use new technology to change how we measure whether or not our office is working, so that we don't have to have someone like me in their junior year of summer working down in the basement. Thank you.